gentlemen, on behalf of Save the Children and the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, thank you so much for joining us today for this important discussion regarding education under attack in the occupied Palestinian territories. We're very grateful to all our co-sponsors who are supporting this side event today, namely Belgium, Norway, Ireland, South Africa, Spain, Slovenia, and Uruguay. Many thanks to them for their support. The situation, let me just give you a few words of introduction. The situation in the occupied Palestinian territory remains horrific for children. The Palestinians in Gaza face at the moment an impossible choice to starve or being risk of being shot while trying to reach out to food to feed their family. According to the latest UN annual report of the Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict, just released a few days ago, the occupied Palestinian territory recorded the highest number of grave violations against children, the verified. Everything a child needs to survive is being blocked, and the only solution seems to be an immediate and definite ceasefire to ensure conditions that allow children for the protection and the fulfillment of their rights that they deserved. Amidst these devastating conditions for children in Gaza, we want to shed light on the situation of education. The schools continues to being bombs and reported attacks against schools, against students that should normally be protected under international law are continuously witnessed by our teams. Nearly 3/4 of all school buildings in Gaza have been directly hit since October 2023. And as OHCHR stated, these attacks are an assault on the right to safe education and a violation of international law. In this context, I just want to recognize the critical role played by the UN Commission of Inquiry, and we will hear Mr. Chris Sidoti in a moment. The critical work that they do to document these grave violations and all their efforts. I really commend the Commission of Inquiry for all their efforts to systematically include thorough documentations on children-specific crimes, as well as investigating the impact of any reported crimes and violations against children. The work of the Commission is vital in ensuring accountability and keeping the plight of Palestinian children at the forefront of international attention. I'm very pleased to introduce our distinguished speakers who will share then further insight on the situation of attacks on education in this context. We will discuss the scale and implication of these attacks, as well as hear more from the latest report of the Commission of Inquiry. I am very pleased to start by giving the floor to His Excellencies Marcos Gomez Martinez, Permanent Representative of Spain to the UN in Geneva. We're very grateful for Spain's leadership in advocating for the protection of education and more broadly for your engagement to protect the children in armed conflict agenda. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Aurélie, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon on this really important issue. We are gathering at a moment of immense and ongoing devastation in Gaza, with the widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure and immense human suffering. And amidst this chaos and destruction, there's one reality that stands out. Education is also under attack. That's why we have co-organized this meeting with the co-sponsorship of the Permanent Missions of Belgium, Ireland, Norway, South Africa, Slovenia, and Uruguay. As you said, we believe this topic deserves the attention of the international community. Gaza stands as a test of the credibility of the system. We need to respond to what's going on. You also mentioned the report of the Commission of Inquiry. It's just terrible. It describes a situation that is beyond outrageous. The attacks on the education system are crippling not only the future of the Gazans, but peace also. We would appeal to the Israeli authorities. What do they expect from 600,000 children being bombed? With no schooling, with hunger. What do they expect for the security of their country? The Commission categorizes the actions that are taking place in Gaza as war crimes and the crime against humanity of extermination. This says it all, really. We will listen from the experts who have lots to tell to us, but let me frame two dimensions of today's discussion. One related to accountability for attacks on education and the other on education in emergencies. Both Hamas and Israel have to be held accountable for the harm that they are causing on the occupied Palestinian territories including East Jerusalem, and in Israel itself. Today, we have the opportunity to share ideas on how to bring to justice those accountable for their crimes and what third state parties can do to strengthen these accountability efforts. Impunity needs to end. On promoting education in emergencies, we think that it is life-saving. Educating emergencies is life-saving because it helps to reduce trauma and projects children into their future. Spain views education as a cornerstone of its humanitarian and diplomatic agenda. Since the second international conference on safe schools that took place in Mallorca in 2019, and I contributed to organizing that event, Spain has been a champion in the Safe Schools Declaration together with Norway, Argentina, and Nigeria. And this year we are going to celebrate 10th anniversary of the declaration, endorsed already by 121 members. The upcoming international conference that is going to be held at the end of the year in Kenya will be an opportunity to recommit with the initiative and to bring more countries in to transform statements into actions. And we welcome the Commission of Inquiry's recommendation to Israel to endorse also the Safe Schools Declaration and urge the government of Israel to endorse and implement it. So I will not waste more of the time, precious time for this meeting. I would like to hear what experts have to tell to us, but be of course sure that Spain will support these efforts on accountability and on supporting education under attack. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your strong remarks and for Spain's strong stand to advocate for the protection of education and for pushing for greater accountability. I'm very pleased now to turn to our panelists who will be online with us. I would like to start with calling for Mr. Chris Sidoti, who is member of the Commission of Inquiry, who will present the key findings of their recent report released on the 10th of June. Chris, if you're online, you have the floor. I hope Chris can...
Thank you. Can you see me and hear me?
Hear us. Yes, hello, Chris, we can hear you. Hopefully, I think we need to take our little headset. Chris, can you speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Aurelie, and thank you, Ambassador Gomez Martinez, for your opening comments. The war in Gaza has been described, including by UNICEF, as a war against children. For that reason, it has been part of our Commission of Inquiry's focus from the very beginning in all of our reports. We have a children's advisor who has contributed very strongly to the reports that we have written. Early next year, we'll be issuing a special report on the situation of children arising from the conflict. So this is a subject that is very important to us, and we are pleased for that reason that Save the Children and the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack and 7 member states of the United Nations have sponsored this discussion today. It's very important to have this focus. 2 weeks ago, our Commission of Inquiry presented our report to the Human Rights Council, focusing on attacks on educational facilities and religious and cultural sites in the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel. We found that since 7 October 2023, Israeli security forces have damaged and destroyed more than 90% of the school and university buildings in Gaza, creating conditions where education for children, including adolescents, and the livelihood of teachers have been made impossible. With over 90% of education facilities in Gaza destroyed or seriously damaged, the clear markings of facilities and multiple targeting of several facilities, it seems unavoidable to conclude that education in itself was a target by the Israeli authorities. This is consistent with findings we made in our report to the General Assembly last October, that there had been a concerted attempt to destroy all health infrastructure in Gaza since 7 October 2023. As for health, so also for education. For our report, we investigated and documented at least 15 attacks on schools and 2 universities by the Israeli security forces in the Gaza Strip. This includes damaging or destroying educational facilities by means of controlled demolition, airstrikes, and burning. Some schools were subjected to multiple attacks. Many were serving as shelters, believed to be safe refuge for internally displaced persons forced from their homes and their neighbourhoods by Israeli evacuation orders. The schools, because they were safe shelters, or considered to be so, were housing a very large number of people, resulting in high numbers of civilian casualties, primarily of children and women. The Commission also found multiple instances of Israeli military use of educational facilities and presented its findings on one such instance of a university that had been used for military purposes by the Israeli security forces, and one incident of a school that had been similarly used by Hamas. We found that Israeli security forces have intentionally destroyed educational facilities in Gaza and identified some of the Israeli military units involved in the attacks. For example, the 8170 Combat Engineering Battalion of the 252 Division was involved in the controlled demolition of the Beit Hanun Preparatory Girls B School and the neighbouring Beit Hanun Elementary Co-educational C School in mid-November 2023. We found that the 710th Combat Engineering Battalion and the 8130 Armoured Battalion, under the commander of the 99th Division, are responsible for demolishing Israel University's Al-Zahara campus on 13 January 2024. We found that the 749 Combat Engineering Battalion demolished 2 buildings of the Al-Azhar University's Al-Mugraka campus on 7 December 2023, after the university had been attacked and severely damaged by aerial bombardment and ground-based small arms engagement at least 3 times between 26 October and 7 December 2023. With regard to Al-Azhar University's Al-Mukraka South Campus, we also found that its third building, King Hassan II College of Environmental and Agricultural Sciences, had been used by the Israeli security forces to store munitions, vehicles, and other military equipment. As part of their use of the building, Israeli security forces had also converted the ground floor into a synagogue for the use by soldiers, with a dedicated plaque that was also publicised and endorsed by the government of Israel on its social media platforms, and a mezuzah fixed to the entrance of the building. All of these actions indicated to the Commission that the university had been viewed as one of a series of military bases intended for future use in the Netzarim corridor. We collected many photos, videos, and statements posted by Israeli soldiers mocking and referencing the education system in Gaza before and after destroying educational facilities. It was also clear through these videos and photographs that at the time of demolishing or burning down schools, there was no fighting in the area, which also suggests there was no military justification for these actions and a clear intent to destroy educational facilities. To the Commission's knowledge, no disciplinary action was taken against those soldiers responsible for these actions. This is yet another example of a permissive military culture where high-ranking Israeli commanders essentially endorse certain misconduct of their soldiers by doing nothing about it. Over 658,000 school-aged children in Gaza have been denied access to formal education and the accompanying protective support of a functional education system. While some online education platforms have been provided, these have not and cannot make up for the loss of the education system, which includes a loss of an important sense of normalcy and stability that access to education gives children and young people. The complex situation children have found themselves in has diverted their attention from education to a focus on survival amid attacks, uncertainty, starvation, and subhuman living conditions. Children have also been increasingly forced to seek informal work. Online platforms can never replicate a nurturing, protective, social environment that a school provides. They cannot shape children's personalities and lives. School is significant for a child's development that fosters a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, encourages critical thinking, and supports the development of essential life skills such as social interaction. None of these elements have been available to children in Gaza for the past 21 months, since 7 October 2023, which is also seriously affecting their mental health. The systematic targeting of educational facilities has extended well beyond Gaza and has affected all Palestinian children throughout the occupied Palestinian territories. In the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, closures, demolition orders, restrictions, military raids, and large-scale military operations have resulted in severe disruption to education, leading to casualties, injuries, psychological trauma among students and teachers, destruction of school infrastructure, and negatively impacting the well-being of children and the community. Israeli settlers have been responsible for violent attacks against schools and students, leaving children and educators terrified and traumatized. Israel has done little to prevent or prosecute settlers who have intentionally targeted educational facilities to terrorise communities and force people to leave their homes. Israeli authorities themselves have been directly responsible for this. As recently as the last 2 months, 6 UNRWA schools in East Jerusalem have been closed, depriving these students of education. Amid all these attacks and destruction, it's the Palestinian children and young people who have borne the brunt of the repercussions of these inexplicable acts. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Education, since 7 October 2023, more than 15,553 school students have been killed and 23,411 injured in Gaza. While in the West Bank, Israeli authorities have killed 103 students, injured 691, and detained 361 as of 24 June. In the same period, more than 1,100 university students have been killed and over 2,300 injured in Gaza. While in the West Bank, 35 university students have been killed, over 219 injured, and 399 detained. As I said at the start, this is a war against children, and it's a war that simply has to stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for this powerful account of all the work, the documentation work of the Commission of Inquiry has undertaken with this report. I would like now to turn still online to our next speaker, Mr. Fadi Beidoun, coordinator from UNICEF of the education cluster in the occupied Palestinian territory, who will provide insight on the impact of this attack on education and access to learning. Fadi, if you can hear us, he's online. Can you give us then a reality check of the situation on the ground when it comes to access to education and the priorities of the cluster to respond to the current situation? Over to you.
Sound check is okay? Excellent.
Yes, we can hear you.
We have a presentation to share also, if possible. Until the presentation is on, I just want to give you a quick brief on the cluster. The cluster is a body that coordinates EIE interventions in humanitarian context, including Palestine. It's co-led by UNICEF and Save the Children, and our main work is to coordinate education efforts in crisis and also provide data and information for both programmatic and advocacy efforts and initiatives by different actors locally and globally. I had many statistics to share, but Chris also have shared many of those. So I will give you a quick brief on Gaza, then West Bank, and then we'll jump into the priorities of the cluster, what partners have been doing, and then the challenges that we are facing. And we hope that those forums, such as the one we have here, can help us advocate to overcome those challenges. Can we go next, please? As Chris said, in Gaza, we have lost the whole education system since 7th of October. There has been no formal schooling whatsoever, especially face-to-face, since the beginning of the war. We've lost most of the education infrastructure. We've lost, unfortunately, around 15,000 children, students, and around 1,000 teachers. Next, please. While in West Bank, the situation is also dire, and it's important to note that education in West Bank has been also heavily disrupted since 7th of October. We had been reporting frequent attacks on education, from military incursions to military checkpoints, denying children access to education, to arrests of children, and also to military operations directly affecting and injuring and killing children and teachers. Since 7th of October, children in West Bank have not been attending regularly face-to-face schooling, and refugee camps and children in Jerusalem under the UNRWA umbrella has also been affected heavily. And I leave this to Julia to give us more details on how education under UNRWA has been severely impacted since 7th of October. Next, please. As also Chris really briefed us, children in Gaza have been really witnessing horrors since 7th of October. They have not been attending formal education. They have no place to play, no safe areas to gather, and this has really impacted their mental well-being. And also, as I've said, we've lost many children, students, and their teachers since the beginning of the war. Even in shelters, as you see in this picture, it's overcrowded by tents and families hosted by those schools. So children have no place whatsoever to really play, to really live their normal lives as any other child across the world. Next, please. I don't want to go through the statistics much because Chris has really said a lot, but I want to emphasize that the education cluster has been since day one monitoring the education infrastructure in Gaza through field visits and through satellite imagery and technology. And since 7th of October, we have monitored that around 88% of schools in Gaza would need full reconstruction or major rehabilitation, while around 95% of schools in Gaza have been somehow damaged. They might be direct hit, they might be damaged, and they might be fully destroyed. Next, please. The assessment shows that, give me a second. That at least 85 schools in Gaza were fully destroyed, and another 73 has at least lost half of its structure. And in different governorates such as Gaza, North Gaza, and Rafah, mainly 100% of schools have been impacted by the ongoing war. Next, please. I want to show you some pictures derived from the satellite imagery that also shows Israeli military presence inside school premises. As you can see on the picture on the right, you can see Israeli tanks and armored vehicles parked inside a school. Satellite imagery as well shows us that a school here in Rafah, which was completely wiped out. And as you can see, its whole surrounding has been wiped out as well. This is another satellite imagery picture showing also a school being fully destroyed. This is a picture from the ground showing a school also fully destroyed. And those are pictures showing Israeli military presence inside schools, where they were used as sometimes military bases, and like in the picture on the left, they were used as detention centers. And as Chris said, Israeli forces has blown out schools, and those are videos. I think if we share the presentation later, you can open the links and see them. Those are videos of full school structures being blown out by dynamite. So when it comes to the response, although the situation is really difficult, the environment is not really friendly to work in, but the education cluster partners have been able to do a lot since 7th of October. The cluster has been working on a plan that really supports children well-being through MHPSS. Secondly, to support children's learning through non-formal education. And third, to support UNRWA and Ministry of Education in ensuring that children can access distance learning as well. Our plan for 2025, only for first-line emergency response in education. This does not include reconstruction. It does not include early recovery interventions. We do estimate that $230 million are needed during 2025 to ensure continuity of learning for children. Unfortunately, funding is very low for education, and we have not been able to secure more than 15% of this number. When it comes to priorities for 2025, which is included in our plan, mainly it's around ensuring that children can access recreational activities and MHPSS activities. Those are conducted sometimes in classrooms where families leave the classroom that they're living in for us to really implement MHPSS and learning activities. Sometimes they happen in a school playground, hosting IDPs, and in certain occasions we were able really to establish temporary learning spaces, tents, around areas of displacement, and we were able to provide MHPSS and learning in those temporary learning spaces. Those temporary learning spaces were established by education cluster partners to really host children for learning and MHPSS activities. We were able also to provide learning materials and assistive devices to children, although it was minimal because Israeli restrictions could not allow us to bring education materials into Gaza, but in very small portions throughout the war. Education has never been prioritized for supplies coming into Gaza. And as I've said, we've been working hard to ensure that children can access some sort of distance learning through UNRWA and the Ministry of Education. And in our centers, we were able to provide referral to children in need and also to support children with disabilities with assistive devices. But as I've said, we couldn't reach everyone due to the limited resources. Next, please. That's how a temporary learning space looks like. And this is an optimal space where you can see a tent, children attending with minimal furniture, a learning session. Quickly, I want to go and skim through the partners operating in Gaza. We have 48 partners operating in Gaza across different areas. And as you can see, since the last 3 months, no one has been able to operate in Rafah. The partners are really supporting children across the other governorates of Gaza. Since 7th of October, we were able to reach 315,000 children, mainly through distance learning, recreational activities, and learning sessions in temporary learning spaces. Since the last 3 to 4 months, we have lost, due to evacuation orders, due to continued hostilities, at the peak of our interventions during the ceasefire, we were able to establish around 600 temporary learning space hosting children. And with all the hostilities and the unsafe environment now in Gaza, this number has really decreased to 140 temporary learning space, as the next slide shows, if you can please move on. We have dropped from around 600 temporary learning space to 140 that are now actually operating in Gaza due to the unsafe environment and the evacuation orders, which have now affected around 70% of Gaza land. Next, please. Again, those are examples of the really heroic work that our partners and their field staff are doing inside shelters and in temporary learning spaces, where you can see children really happy and enjoying the activities. Next, please. Again, some pictures for you to really reflect on. And that's how schools now look like in Gaza. And that's how children attend schools in Gaza. In certain occasions, as you can see in the photo in the middle, it's a tent without really a rooftop. It's an open space where children are gathering for learning. Next, please. Next. In terms of challenges, it's very important to note that, as I've said, attacks on schools, bombardment of schools have really made schools and temporary learning spaces unsafe. And people are really now becoming more and more scared to send their children to such spaces, such as schools, because of the fear of attacks. It's also important to note that evacuation orders have been really hindering our activities. In a certain area, we establish 10 spaces, we invest a lot in those spaces, and then in one night there's an evacuation order for this whole area, and we lose all the investment we've put in those spaces and in really bringing children to learning. In terms of distance learning, there are 2 programs ongoing by UNRWA and the Ministry of Education, but they are facing a lot of challenges due to internet connectivity issues, to devices issues, etc. For توجيهي exams, I think, which is official 12th grade exams, all children since 2 years have not been able to sit for this exam, and this really provides them with no sense of future. They have no clue what will be next. How will they attend universities? When will this official exam really take place? And I also leave Julia to talk more about توجيهي. We have an issue of bringing supplies into Gaza. As I've said, since 7th of October 2023, minimal supplies were brought into Gaza for education purposes due to Israeli restrictions. And as I've said also before, funding is very low for education. Next, please. I have the cost of inaction here, and I think Chris has really articulated really well. We're losing a whole generation of Palestinian children, both in Gaza and West Bank, due to disruption of education, due to the trauma they're facing. And this will have really long-term effects on the Palestinian society, on the Palestinian economy. And if we do not act now, and if we do not protect children from attack and education from attack, we will really be losing generations to come in Palestine. Next, please. Those are, through our fieldwork, we were able to capture some quotes from children who are telling us how much they miss their schools. They miss really wearing the uniform. They miss the routine of going to school and gather with their peers every day. They want to wake up, they want to get dressed, they want to prepare for the day as any other child across the globe. They had aspirations, they had really dreams that has all collapsed due to the ongoing war in Gaza. But despite all this, next please, children are still calling for the end of the war. And families are telling us across Gaza Strip that education is the most priority for them. And in certain assessments, they have told us that it is equivalent to food, because they want their children to have a future, they want their children to attend schools, and they want to grow some hope in their children for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fadi, for this really powerful account and for highlighting, as you said, the essential and heroic work by the partner to continue giving some form of education to children in this condition. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor now to our next panelist, Ms. Julia Dicum, Director of Education from UNRWA, who will share the experience of working with directly affected school and students under UNRWA's mandate. Julia, can you tell us more about the impact of the loss of access to education and the loss of learning? Over to you. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll just do a sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I apologize. I'm not in the office today, and I found a very quiet place to do this. And as soon as you called my name, people came into the hallway behind me. So hopefully it's not too disruptive. Excellencies, co-sponsoring governments, and other honored guests to this important event, I want to begin by thanking Save the Children and the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack for inviting me to this important panel. I do believe we have some photographs that we have asked to be cycled through during my intervention to show you what the effects have been and how we are continuing to work in education and psychosocial support, particularly in Gaza. For Palestine refugees, UNRWA is seen as the mechanism through which the international community has sought to uphold and safeguard their right to education for over 75 years now. In 2023 alone, we served more than 540,000 students across our 5 fields of operation, of which 348,000 were in the OPT. We are gathered here today deeply alarmed by the findings of the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including in East Jerusalem. Over the past 20 months, UNRWA has faced a growing number of attacks and accusations, as well as many other partners. Despite our continued effort to remind all parties to the conflict that UNRWA installations, including our schools, are protected under international law with the same privileges and immunities granted to all United Nations entities and personnel, these attacks have persisted. This includes repeated allegations concerning the content we teach in our schools. We categorically reject these claims and reaffirm our unwavering commitment to delivering education that aligns with UN values. Our curricula undergo rigorous reviews to ensure they reflect these principles. As already presented by Fadi and the Education Cluster, in Gaza, at least 162 out of 187 UNRWA school buildings have been damaged, with 131 schools having suffered direct attacks. Some are evident on the screen as I speak. The Commission of Inquiry found that Israel has intentionally demolished UNRWA schools, but could not identify any military objective for these actions. 253 of the 317 UNRWA staff who have been killed in Gaza were education staff. In the West Bank and East Jerusalem, UNRWA schools have also not been immune to. For example, in January this year, 10 UNRWA schools in the north of the West Bank were forced to close, affecting over 6,000 Palestine refugees. In May 2025 in East Jerusalem, Israeli police and municipal authorities forcibly closed 6 UNRWA schools, depriving another 800 students of their education. Claims from the Israeli Authority that students would be accommodated in schools run by the Jerusalem municipality have not materialized. UNRWA has responded by vigorously protesting and condemning these actions as both a breach of UN privileges and immunities and a breach of the students' right to education. And yet we have not received a response from Israeli authorities, let alone any justification for these violations. Meanwhile, the scale of learning loss is staggering. Last summer, working with the University of Cambridge and their Center of Lebanese Studies, we estimated that students in Gaza had lost 14 months of education due to COVID previous to the escalations. If fighting continues until 2026, the losses will stretch to 5 years. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, between January to June 2024, students have had access to in-person learning for only about 2 days a week on average, and between 8 to 20% of UNRWA schools face temporary closures since October 2023. Despite these challenges, UNRWA has not stood still, pivoting to find innovative solutions to support learning continuity and psychosocial support for the children in our schools in the OPT. In Gaza, we are reaching more than 55,000 children with in-person learning, close to 300,000 students through remote learning, and more than 520,000 students with psychosocial support, even in the absence of a ceasefire. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, all UNRWA students finished the last 2 scholastic years through combined remote and face-to-face learning, including psychosocial support. In the North, with the support of the PA Ministry of Education and Higher Education, UNRWA utilized 11 public schools in Jenin and Tulkarm as alternative learning spaces for 4,500 UNRWA students to ensure they could continue their education this year despite the ongoing military operations. While it is true that the key parties of this conflict have not signed the Safe Schools Declaration, international law safeguards schools as civilian objects, especially UNRWA schools, which are also UN installations. Attacks on education facilities, students, and personnel simply must stop, and those responsible need to be held accountable. A just and durable solution for Palestine refugees remains the most sustainable path to securing their rights, including their right to education. While UNRWA continues to deliver education under these extraordinary circumstances, no emergency response can substitute for the stability and opportunity that a political solution will bring. I would also like to briefly mention the issue of the funding of education in emergencies. The wider situation that is facing the global donor community and donor space has affected education and emergencies funding already. We know that education cannot wait. The mechanism developed about 10 years ago to fund specifically education in emergencies is suffering from donor malaise and donor cutbacks to their budgets, which is directly affecting whether or not there can be additional funding for UNRWA through their mechanism. We are working hard with Education Cannot Wait, as are our supporters, to try to ensure that there can be additional funding for UNRWA. But at the moment, our current grant with UNRWA, which supports our programming in Gaza, ends at the end of this month, and we have no alternative funding, which means we may have to stop our services in Gaza. UNRWA students and all children caught up in this conflict need the hostilities to end. And for that, they need your advocacy, diplomatic action, and commitment to fund and support their right to education as critical to enabling a just and hopeful and peaceful future. I want to thank you very much for coming today and for your time.
Thank you so much, Julia, for this account and clarifying the challenges faced by UNRWA in the current circumstances. We have 12 minutes to go, 11. I would like to now welcome my colleague Ilaria Paolazzi, Senior Advocacy and Policy Advisor from the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, who will speak about accountability. Over to you, Ilaria.
Thank you, Aurélie. Thank you to all co-organizers and co-sponsors of this event. I want to welcome the collaboration on this event, first of all, and also the data that colleagues have just shared, which are extremely alarming, and so are the figures reported in the 2025 report of the Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict. GCPEA strongly condemns Israel's systematic attack of the Palestinian education system, and particularly what the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education has defined scholasticide in Gaza. Considering the global funding crisis, I want to stress the importance of independent data and monitoring on attacks on education and military use of educational facilities. States must hold the line and do everything in their hands to further strengthen the MRM and also further support the investigative mechanisms and also allow them access. This is key for accountability, and states, including Israel, have the duty to cooperate and grant access to them. The Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack research shows that education-related violations and crimes remain under-investigated and under-prosecuted at all levels, even when evidence suggests they amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity, as in the OPT. This is due to a wide range of challenges, including a chronicle tendency to overlook certain core international crimes against and affecting children, but also the lack of training of professionals and also the lack of an absolute prohibition of the military use of educational facilities in international law. GCPEA has published a new guide, which is titled Enhancing Accountability for Attacks on Education, Investigating and Prosecuting Education-Related Crimes. I invite all of you to use the QR code on the slide and check out our guide. The main purpose is to encourage and support national and international accountability mechanisms to prioritize and conduct timely and effective investigations and prosecutions of crimes against and affecting education. The Commission of Inquiry's inclusion of a specific focus on attacks on education is very much aligned, with our recommendation. This point is very important because education is usually not part of the repertoire of questions that investigators ask. Attacks on education do not end up being part of the evidence. And in practice, the destruction of schools is rarely prioritized and considered grave enough, especially in contexts where there's high level of violence against civilians. The Commission's report directly responds to this gap, and we hope and encourage all relevant stakeholders to use the report to raise awareness on this issue, and we specifically encourage prosecutors to follow up on the report's legal determinations and use the extensive evidence to explore education-specific legal charges under the Rome Statute. For example, the crime of intentionally attacking buildings dedicated to education, given that the Commission's findings suggest that the majority of educational buildings attacked by Israel were not used for military purposes by Hamas. Our guide also makes the case for recognizing attacks on schools as crimes against humanity under Article 7 of the Rome Statute. We therefore welcome the Commission's determination that attacks on schools sheltering civilians by Israeli security forces amount to the crime against humanity of extermination. We think this complements the ICC's recent jurisprudence on Afghanistan, which recognized the severe deprivation of women and girls' rights to education as the crime against humanity of persecution. We encourage states to build on this jurisprudence to crystallize the systematic denial of education as a specific crime in the draft Treaty on Crimes Against Humanity. Let me conclude by highlighting also the importance of non-judicial accountability avenues, in particular, the mechanism based on which Israel has been listed in Annex 1 to the 2025 CAC report for attacks on schools. We urge the government of Israel to commit to a time-bound action plan and a joint prevention plan to end attacks on schools. And last but not least, the Safe Schools Declaration, which is at the heart of GCPEA's work. We urge Israel to endorse and fully implement the declaration, and also all the states who haven't endorsed yet to do so as solidarity to the global cause and to the Palestinian scholasticide. We also recommend the government of the State of Palestine and de facto authority in Gaza to fully implement the declaration and its guidelines on protecting schools and universities from military use during armed conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ilaria, for these important points. Pressed with time, I really want to give you enough time to say a few words to close this event. I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mrs. Tehole, Deputy Permanent Representative of South Africa to the UN in Geneva, one of the co-sponsors of of today's events. South Africa is really at the forefront of initiatives aimed at reinforcing respect for international standards and supporting accountability, including for crimes and violations against children. You have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Excellency Ambassador Gomez Martinez, colleagues. As a proud signatory of the Safe School Declaration, whose 10th anniversary we commemorate this year, South Africa is pleased to have co-sponsored this important side event. In so doing, we are, however, deeply alarmed by the findings of the Independent Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, highlighted by Commissioner Sidoti earlier. Indeed, safety in school settings is a fundamental precondition for realizing the right to education. Yet schools in the OPT, which should serve as sanctuaries for children's learning and growth, have instead become sites of fear and destruction, amounting to what UN experts have termed as scholasticide. As South Africans, we know all too well the devastation wreaked on children when schools are transformed into military zones. Accordingly, we could not simply fold our arms while innocent young lives are being condemned to despair and hopelessness simply because they happen to be Palestinian. It is within this context that South Africa sought to hold Israel accountable for violating its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide by instituting proceedings at the International Court of Justice. In so doing, South Africa's submission drew on various examples to demonstrate its case, including the impact of violations on international law on education and children in the OPT. Moderator, arising from South Africa's experience in this regard, I now wish to turn to some recommendations that participants may wish to consider in strengthening accountability on education-related crimes. The first one would be, we must recognize and condemn the activities that violate children's rights and disrupt their education. We must urge all stakeholders to ensure that these voices are heard, not only in our discussions, but also in our legal and political frameworks that govern human rights. The second one would be, we need to strengthen multilateral engagement and encourage states to actively participate in forums that address the rights of children in situations of armed conflict and foreign occupation. The UN and other international organizations must have the authority to investigate violations and hold those responsible accountable. The third one, we need to encourage states to uphold their obligations under international law, including the Convention on the Right of the Child. States must not only condemn these violations, but they must take proactive steps to prevent them from occurring in the first place. The fourth one would be that we must enhance monitoring and reporting of violations. An effective monitoring system is crucial for documenting abuses against children. States and civil society must work collaboratively to enhance data collection and reporting on violations impacting children's education, ensuring findings inform policy and advocacy efforts. Moderator, in closing, allow me to return to where I began, namely the situation confronting children in the OPT. In this regard, South Africa wishes to reiterate its call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the uninterrupted flow of humanitarian aid. This is a fundamental first step in creating the conditions for children to learn and for teachers to teach. However, beyond this, we too must address the root causes. Unless and until we, as the international community, live up to our obligations to bring an end to Israel's unlawful occupation, the unimaginable suffering of children in the OPT will continue. I thank you.
Thank you so much for these powerful closing remarks. Thank you all, our very esteemed speakers, and for the co-sponsor to this event. This is coming to a close. I want to really deeply apologize to Slovenia, who wanted to add an intervention from the floor. I'm sorry that we're pressed with time, and I see colleagues outside the room. Thank you again for attending this discussion and for keeping attention to the situation of the children and education in occupied Palestinian territory. Thank you very much.